Hello there and welcome to Star Wars Comics in Canon, your guide to the wider Star Wars canon through the comic book lens. And to take you on this journey, I'm your host, Mike Burton. Hello everyone, and a happy 2021 to all of you. I hope the end of 2020 was pleasant, and I hope that my gap of about 2 weeks of not releasing content didn't stir any of you too crazy, so fear no more. I am back again weekly, because I want to break over Christmas. So let's get straight into things. This week I am tackling the final 4 Age of Republic stories. Now, Age of Republic is a comic series of one-shots, which basically means each comic is like its own story, in a sense. And so each of the Age of series, there's Rebellion, Republic, and also Resistance. All of those just tackle the 3 major eras of Star Wars. Age of Republic is the prequel trilogy, Age of Rebellion is the original trilogy, and Age of Resistance is the sequel trilogy. So with each of those, the main characters normally get an issue, and a couple of side sort of characters get them as well. And this time I'm going to be focusing on the Anakin Skywalker one, the Padmé Amidala one, and then the 2 sort of shorter stories that are within the Age of Republic special, the weapon that features Mace Windu, and the 501st+1 featuring Rex and Jar Jar Binks. So I'm going to be tackling Anakin first, so we can go from there. So all of these stories I'm tackling in this episode, they're all amidst the Clone Wars. So if you've seen the Clone Wars series, obviously it spans over a 3-year time period. It's at any point between those, which is where all these stories fall. So that is between Episode 2, Attack of the Clones, and before Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. Now, both the Anakin and the Padmé stories are written, drawn, and etc. by basically the same people. So the writer is Jody Houser. The pencilers are both Wilton Santos and Cory Smith. The inker is Walden Wong, and the colourist is Java Tartaglia. Now, as I said, that is the same for Padmé Amidala, except for Padmé's, there's also an inker, which is Marc Deering. And for clarity, this comic specifically is at the start of the Clone Wars, 22 years before the Battle of Yavin, so that is just after Attack of the Clones finished. And the comic was released in February 2019. The trade paperback collection of The Heroes, which all of these stories will be in, that was released May 2019. And then the Age of Republic hardcover was released in February 2020. The hardcover features all of the heroes and all of the villains' stories. I'm not going to delve into backstory really about Anakin Skywalker, considering he is basically the main character of several of the Star Wars films and also primarily the Clone Wars series as well, along with obviously Obi-Wan and Ahsoka. So aside from telling you that he was born 41 years before the Battle of Yavin and that he was around 19 or 20 years old in this comic, that's really all you need to know. If you need loads of other backstory from Anakin, you can also check out my episode 11, which is about Obi-Wan and Anakin. It is a mini-series that is set between episode 1, Phantom Menace, and episode 2, Attack of the Clones. It's when Anakin is still a young Padawan. So that was episode 11, you can go check that out if you desire. Or you can, watch all the Star Wars films and then watch the Clone Wars. And Clone Wars Anakin, I can assure you, is way better than movie Anakin, because Clone Wars Anakin is a much more deep and well made, I think, in a lot of ways, but I'm not going to delve into that here. At the very end of the whole thing, I'm going to give you guys some recommendations for Clone Wars episodes and things, or kind of if you wanted to start the Clone Wars, where to kind of go, but I'll talk about all that at the end. So let's start with the crawl. So this Age of Republic story is called The Sacrifice. The heroic Jedi Knights lead the clone armies of the Republic against the endless droid legions of the rebellious separatists. The powerful young Jedi prodigy Anakin Skywalker may be the Republic's best hope to end the conflict, but as the fires of war engulf more and more of the galaxy with each passing day, Anakin faces challenges his training never prepared him for. So the comic starts with Anakin shooting down some droid ships and things that have been shooting on the clones and whatnot, and they seem to retreat and disappear to a nearby moon. They were found on the moon Kudo 3, and Admiral Ularin says to Anakin that they should attack from space. They should do like a bombarding orbital assault, just shoot big beams down basically to destroy the whole factory and get rid of the separatists. Anakin disagrees and goes and talks to Obi-Wan. Now, the Kudo system and the Corvair sector, they're only really in the TIE Fighter comics. They're not anywhere else in the canon that I can find. The TIE Fighter comics are also written by Jody Houser, who wrote this and the Padmé one, and she wrote quite a lot of the Age of Republic stories. But also, Jody Houser wrote, as I said, the TIE Fighter comic, which I'm going to be tackling at some point in the future. It's a mini-series that I've got, but I have not yet read, so I'll be tackling that at some point. Also, for clarity, Admiral Ularin, I spoke about him quite a lot in the last episode, number 38, where I spoke about Thrawn and things. I gave quite a lot of backstory to Yolaran. His name is Wolf Yularin. He's in Clone Wars a lot. He's in Rebels, and he features in A New Hope. A New Hope's when you first saw him. He has a very good moustache. Basically, he has white hair and a white moustache, and is wearing a white top in A New Hope. And in the Clone Wars, he is the narrator as well as Admiral Ularin, who is basically, he works with Anakin and Obi-Wan quite a lot. You'd recognise him quite a lot if you saw him, and he's quite a major player in Star Wars. So Anakin goes and talks to Obi-Wan, and Obi-Wan sort of says, trust your feelings, that sort of thing. And so Anakin decides to fly down to Kudo 3 himself. He goes down there and he kind of sleuths around a little bit, and then he finds that everywhere is basically empty and he can't exactly find out why. So he manages to go into the factory and he sees that loads of people are being used as slaves. So the people of Kudo, they're not aligned with the Republic or with the Separatists. They want to remain neutral. But what the Republic thought was, because droid stuff was kind of near them, they thought that, clearly they're working with the Separatists under the table. That clearly isn't the case, because all of their people have been enslaved by the Separatists and are actually being forced in a production line, a factory sort of thing, to make more droids and make more starships and whatnot. And Anakin sees this and is enraged, because one of the biggest things that causes Anakin anger is slavery, due to obviously his life as a child. There's some really cool comic strips here where Anakin basically goes mental and destroys a lot of the droids and things, and he saves the people. And he then goes back to the ship, he speaks with Yolarin and Obi-Wan, and they basically congratulate him, saying, look, if we'd have done that orbital assault like planned, we would have killed basically all of the innocents as well, barely done any damage to the Separatists, and then they would have used our attack as propaganda against us, and probably rallied more neutral systems to their cause. So the fact that Anakin, did all that sort of stuff means that it's actually really good. He technically disobeyed orders or went over the Admiral's head, kind of did his own thing. I think as he's a general, he kind of outranks stuff, but I'm not going to get into the details of the ranking system in the Republic Army. But essentially, because of that, they said thank you to him, but this reinforces a lot of what happens to Anakin's character in the Clone Wars. He gets told not to do something a certain way, and then either he doesn't and something bad happens because his instincts were correct, or he ignores the people who are telling him what to do, goes and does his own thing anyway. It works out better than anyone thought it would, normally shows something that they'd missed that would have been like a massive catastrophe if he hadn't done the thing he did, and it consistently reinforces him following his own instincts and the fact that he believes the Jedi Council and the Republic in a lot of ways are wrong in the way they do certain things. And this comic is a sort of a nice insight, just to kind of give you a vague idea of how Anakin's transformation to the dark side works throughout the Clone Wars so well. He uses more brutal tactics to get information. That works. He force chokes a few people and to actually get information out, and basically tortures them to get information out that saves hundreds, if not thousands of people's lives. Obviously, in his mind, any ending that is good, the means to that is fine. So if you do something bad to save someone's life, that's okay in Anakin's eyes. And that is shown in, not as much in this comic. This comic is more about sort of disobedience in a way and going his own path. But the Clone Wars does do that quite a lot. So although this comic isn't absolutely outstanding and it didn't blow my mind, it is a cool comic. And if you like the sound of this, and if you sort of like Anakin's turn to the dark side, you find that quite intriguing, I really, really recommend the second run of Darth Vader comics. I believe it's called Darth Vader Dark Lord of the Sith. I don't think it says it anywhere, but normally when you buy it in places, that's what it's called. It's the second run of Darth Vader comics. It is written by Charles Soule. And although I've tackled the first run of Vader comics on here, which are brilliant, they're by Kieran Gillen, they are excellent, but the Darth Vader by Charles Soule, I personally enjoyed more because it is set literally just after Revenge of the Sith, and it shows Vader getting more used to being Darth Vader in a suit rather than how he was before, Anakin not in a suit. And it's him dealing with that as well as now basically being a slave again to Palpatine. So I really recommend that comic run because I think it adds a lot to the character. That, along with Clone Wars and this comic, all kind of culminate together to give you a better view on what Anakin was like and what the movies were trying to portray, but maybe didn't succeed in a lot of ways. But I just wanted to flag that up there just to say it's really good. Also, the third run of Darth Vader comics, which is ongoing at the moment by Greg Pak, I think there's only about 6 or 7 issues of that out at the moment, that also tackles a lot of the sort of Vader coming to terms with things, except that is set between Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. So it shows how he starts to doubt himself after, confronting Luke and cutting off Luke's hand and things, and explaining that he's Luke's dad. From that point, Vader kind of goes in a little spiral in his own mind to try and figure out where his true loyalties lie, and I think that comic does a good way of showing that as well. So really recommend those comics if you want more Anakin backstory. So next up is the Age of Republic Padmé story. The Padmé story is called The Bridge. As I said before, it was written by Jody Houser, penciled by Wilton Santos and Cory Smith, inked by Walden Wong and also Marc Deering, and then also the colourist was Java Tartaglia. Now, this comic was released in March 2019, and as I said with all the other stuff, it was released for the trade paperback, hardcover, etc, etc. So, once again, Padmé is a pretty big part of the prequel trilogy, and also she's in the Clone Wars a lot. There's a lot of episodes of the Clone Wars which are just about her, and she is an incredibly badass character, just to clarify. In episode 3, she seems a bit weak, but in episode 1 and 2 they do a fairly good job of kind of showing what she's like. Episode 2 is probably the best representation of Padmé being quite badass. In the Clone Wars, she's consistently even more badass like that, so this comic kind of alludes to that as well. What I'd say really is a lot of these comics, they're almost like tiny snippets of the sort of thing you can expect from the Clone Wars series, and it is a really good series to get into. There's a lot of NAF episodes, but I'll get into that another time. So Padmé was born 46 years before the Battle of Yavin, and that means that she's about 5 years older than Anakin. So at the time of Phantom Menace, when Anakin is sort of 9 years old, she's about 14 years old. So she's a very, very young monarch, but obviously very mature. Also, a fun fact that a lot of people may not know is that Padmé's surname legally isn't actually Amidala. Her real surname is actually Naberi. Naberi? I think it's Naberi, but it might be Naberi. But it's Naberrie, and she basically added the regal title Amidala when she became queen. That's not dissimilar to how we do it in England. I think in a lot of ways people may be confused to understand it, and I'm a little bit confused by it, but essentially when someone becomes a monarch of some degree, they often will take up a family name of some sort of royalty, things like that, like the Windsor name, things like that. So that's Padmé's real name is Padmé Naberi. And also, if you want more information on Padmé, she is, as I said, in the Clone Wars series, but there's also 2 books that focus on her quite a lot. That's The Queen's Peril and The Queen's Shadow, so go check those out too. So the opening crawl for this one, as I said, the episode is called The Bridge, and the crawl says, "The Clone War rages as the armies of the Republic battle the endless separatist droid legions. But soldiers are not the only ones making sacrifices. The noble Senator Padmé Amidala of Naboo wants nothing more than to bring the conflict to a swift conclusion and spare the galaxy further bloodshed. But victory for the Republic means finding new allies and defeating her enemies both on and off the battlefield." So the comic starts with Anakin and Padmé walking in Coruscant in basically the Senate building, walking and talking. I'm going to read their exchange just for you guys. So it starts with Anakin. "Are you sure you don't want me to come with you? Even on the core worlds, you've been a target before." And Padmé says, "I can't have a Jedi protector all the time, Annie." And he says, "I missed you, Padmé." And she says, "I know. I wish we could see each other more. But as long as the Republic is at war, we each have jobs to do, and watching me isn't yours." And he says, "No, it's more of a hobby." They then kiss, and they hear, "Senator Amidala, the ship is ready to depart." They turn around and see Motte. Padmé says to Anakin that Motte understands discretion, and she walks off with Motte. For clarity, it may be Motte or Motti. It's M-O-T, E with an accent, and then another E. So apologies about my pronunciation there. As well as Motte, they also have Dorme with her. Now, Dorme is a little bit more well-known. I think both can be seen at some point in episodes 2 and 3, but Dorme is actually played by the actress Rose Byrne. The most iconic thing you'd probably remember her doing is in episode 2, when Anakin and Padmé leave to go to Naboo after there's been a couple of assassination attempts. There's one of her handmaidens basically stands with Padmé and says that, she'll basically miss her, and then she sheds one tear while Obi-Wan is talking to Anakin when they're just about to get off the transport. And that one person, that is Dorme. So she is in the films and stuff, and she does stay loyal to Padmé throughout her whole sort of political career. Now, the Queen's Peril and the Queen's Shadow books both go into the handmaidens and the detailing of them a lot more, so I'm not going to go into it here. If you want to know more about Padmé and the Naboo handmaidens, go check out those books. It's also worth mentioning that Dorme shows up again in the 3rd run of Darth Vader comics, the ones I mentioned slightly earlier by Greg Pak, the ones that are currently ongoing at the moment. She appears in the comics 4 and 5 of that, so it's a really cool, interesting storyline, so I implore you guys to check that out too. Motte, though, was just an extra in episode 3, you can just kind of see her at some point. So anyway, Padmé basically told Anakin that she's going to Juro, and then when she gets out of the way of Anakin and stuff, she speaks to Dorme and Motte, or Motti. It might be Motti. I don't know. I'm sorry about this. But basically, she tells them that the reason she told him that they're going to Juro is because Anakin is too close to Palpatine, and this needs to be sort of under the radar because she's going to a neutral world. As Palpatine and the whole Senate have made their stance on neutral worlds very clear. If they aren't enemies or allies, they are to be ignored. For clarity, Duro is mentioned in Battlefront 2, the video game, the sort of campaign of that, and it's home to the Duros species. Now, you've probably seen Duros before. Cad Bane in the Clone Wars series, he's a Duros, and then in the Battlefront 2 game, Iden Versio's sort of loyal friend called Shriv, he is also a Duros. They basically look like our standard stereotypical aliens. They're kind of sort of blue or grey skinned. They've got big eyes, they haven't got a nose, and they've got quite a big mouth but no lips. So they look like a sort of standard stereotypical alien in a lot of ways. And also, fun fact, they were some of the first species in the galaxy to basically use hyperdrive on their ships, and this means that there are loads of them across the universe in all sorts of different places. They're first seen in A New Hope, and then they're again in Clone Wars, Rebels, and lots of other places, so they're quite a common species that you would see quite a lot. Anyway, the reason Padmé is basically taking her two handmaidens with her is because they want to try and see if they can bring another system to the Republic, hopefully to end the war a bit sooner. They make it to the planet Clabron, which I don't think has been anywhere else in canon, so let's just go over that. And as they sort of head there, I want to read an exchange between the handmaidens. So when Padmé's out of earshot, you've just got the two handmaidens talking. I'll just pause between. It's not specifically relevant which one of them is saying what, but you'll kind of get the gist. Did you know? About what? About the Jedi. Our Lady is many things, but subtle she's not. The Jedi even less so. Perhaps that's why they get along so well. And as our handmaidens, sometimes protecting her also means protecting her secrets. I know, it just seems ill-advised. Our Lady allows herself so few moments of happiness. How can we begrudge her this? I suppose all we can do is hope that it doesn't end badly. And obviously I don't need to tell you guys, that is very clearly foreshadowing. So they get to the landing platform on Clabron and they get out the vehicle, they take a look around and there doesn't really seem to be anyone about. They walk up to this sort of front door area and there's someone behind glass and things and says, look, it's dangerous, leave, you don't want to be here and things. And as Padmé's trying to kind of negotiate and things, a couple of shots you hear and then you see that one of her handmaidens gets shot in the shoulder and collapses. The uninjured handmaiden then starts to shoot back at the sniper that's on the roof and they sort of retreat a little bit. Then Padmé bangs on the door and begs that the person who told them it was dangerous to just let them in and get in. So they get inside and think safely. Their new friend basically is called Second Minister Tarmin. And essentially what's happened is he allows them in and they go into another room and it turns out that they've had a lot of issues there as well. In fact, the Grand Minister Stin has been waiting for them and he actually has been shot himself. There was an assassin, and so an alarm went off and most of the workers sort of evacuated, which explains why it's so empty where they are. One little line of dialogue that I quite enjoy, maybe not the best way, is that Stin, the one who's sort of dying on a bed, he asked his medical droid to go and attend to Padmé's handmaiden who is injured, and the droid says, yes, I'll aid the one who will live. So it's a pretty brutal way of having that news. Padmé speaks to Stin for a little while, and basically he says, look, we were trying to stay out of conflict and things. We thought that was the best thing to do. Clearly, it's not really the best thing to do, so we want to support you. If the Republic can help us and can solve our problems, we are happy to go with you. But please prove that I wasn't wrong about you. So Grandmaster Stin starts to pass away, and then as that happens, the second minister takes his place. So this Tarmin gentleman basically has a go at Padmé, saying that you shouldn't have come here. Stin was a fool to invite you. Clearly there were spies, and that's the reason that people found out and he got shot and whatnot. And so she decides to give him a classic Padmé Amidala speech, which I'm going to read out for you. He says to her, what is it that you want, Senator Amidala? And she says, an end to this war, for one, and perhaps I'm asking too much, but I'd like to see a galaxy where systems aren't forced to choose a side out of fear. I've spent most of my life in public service, first on Naboo, then in the Galactic Senate. I've always argued for peace, tried to prevent the suffering of my own people and the greater galaxy. And Tarmin says, how well has that gone over? And she says, let's just say that today isn't my first time being shot at, but trying to serve the greater good doesn't exactly make you popular. This war breaks my heart, more than I can say. The wounds run deep, but I still believe in what the Republic stands for, everything we've worked so hard to build. I've given it my whole heart, my whole life, and I have to believe that the Republic will emerge from this war more united than ever. And Tarmin says, united her? Does that include our assassin friend upstairs? And she says, I have a different idea for them. And they sneak up onto the roof. Padmé shoots the sniper in the back, and then her and her handmaidens basically take her back to the ship and are going to take her to the Republic. And then as Padmé is leaving, Tarmin says to her, I can't promise you that we will make the same choice as Stin did regarding this conflict. We will not fight. But there is other aid we could offer. We will discuss. And Padmé says, a chance is all that we ask for. A chance to prove that our hope for a better galaxy isn't unfounded. And that's where that comic ends. Right, so on to the 2 mini-stories. So the first story is The Weapon, featuring Mace Windu. It is in the Age of Republic special comic, which has 3 mini-stories in there. The one about Mace Windu, the next one I'll be tackling, which is Rex and Jar Jar Binks, and one that I tackled back a few weeks ago, which is the story about Asajj Ventress. The writer of The Weapon is Ethan Sachs, the artist is Paolo Villanelli, and the colourist is Erick Arciniega. I did a whole episode on Mace Windu. It was on episode 16. It tackled the Mace Windu Jedi of the Republic mini-series, which is quite cool, and I give as much background information to Mace Windu in there as I can. He does show up in the Clone Wars in a few episodes as well, which is quite cool, and for clarity, he was born in 72 BBY, so, that's like... He's 50 at the time of the Clone Wars starting, and once again, this comic is around Clone Wars-y sort of time it seems to be, but there's no explicit confirmation. So I'll read the crawl, but as it is an Age of Republic special, the crawl is quite small. Mace Windu in The Weapon. Master Mace Windu is known far and wide as one of the Jedi Order's most formidable warriors, but what the enemies of the Republic don't know about Mace could be their undoing. So it starts off on the planet Usulon, and Usulon has actually appeared in Star Wars Rebels, the animated show. It was in Season 2, Episode 16, Kanan and Ezra fight against the 7th sister and the 5th brother. And aside from that, it doesn't really seem to be in canon much elsewhere. So Mace is basically captured by some terrorists who call themselves freedom fighters and things, and he is taken to this boss of them, essentially. The boss is called Guitaco the Grim. When Mace was speaking with the people who basically took him to Guitaco, Mace found out that a lot of the freedom fighters, in air quotes, were taken when they were children, so they didn't really necessarily have a choice in the matter. So Mace was put in front of Guitaco the Grim. Guitaco starts to kind of brag and say that he's the strongest, he can do this, can do that, blah, blah, blah. And one of the people who escorted Mace has got a little box. They open it up and it's got Mace Windu's lightsaber in there, but it's all dismantled. Mace squares up to Guitaco and basically calls him weak because he kidnaps children and makes them fight his wars for them, and he also accepts money from the Hutts, as in Jabba the Hutts, the clan, and so saying that obviously he's not as strong as he thinks he is because he has to rely on so many other people and abduct children. Mace says to Guitaco that you have one chance to surrender peacefully, and obviously Guitaco laughs at him and says what you think your Jedi friends are going to appear to save you. And Mace basically says that he sent out a message through the Force to let all of the Jedi know where he is, because in this underground place that there's apparently 80,000 kilometers of tunnels and things, so it'd be very hard to find. But he sends out a message in the Force so the other Jedi can kind of find him, but he says he'll have defeated Guitaco before the Jedi arrive. Mace has a small flashback to where he's assembling his lightsaber with Master Huyang, and just for clarity, Huyang is in the Younglings episode arc in Clone Wars, which is a really, really good arc actually. He's voiced by David Tennant in the Clone Wars arc, and it's about younglings creating their lightsabers. They go into Ilum, they find their lightsaber crystals, and then they work out how to assemble a lightsaber. He's quite a cool character, so I thought I'd throw that in there as a little 2-panel flashback thing of Mace making his lightsaber. And then it shows Mace using the Force to reassemble the lightsaber inside that box, all of the pieces form together, and essentially what it is that what this comic is alluding to is that Jedi's lightsabers aren't held together by anything peculiar. It's basically the Jedi uses the Force to bind the pieces together. So when you see Mace's dismantled lightsaber, he can easily just reassemble it with his mind. It connects together, it ignites, shoots out the box, cutting through a few guards on the way, and landing right in Mace's hands. Mace has a battle with Guitaco. They're fighting with... Guitaco has this sort of vibro axe, it looks like a laser blade axe thing, and is fighting with Mace. And while that's happening, a kid, who's one of the probably kidnapped child slaves, shoots Guitaco in the chest with a gun and kills him. The Jedi then arrive to basically come and save Mace Windu, and then as they kind of leave, Mace speaks to Yoda via hologram, and he says, congratulations, you basically saved them. And Mace says, well, what about this girl who escorted me? She was kidnapped as a child. She didn't really have a choice. Like, surely she can be set free. She's at that age where someone may be able to adopt her or something. And Yoda says, look, it's the planet's choices what they do with their own people. She is a criminal, and therefore that planet has to deal with her accordingly, according to their own customs. We can't really intervene. And Mace says something like, well, that means that we didn't save everyone then, did we? And that's how it ends. So it's quite a kind of dark comic, but it's a lot connected to the Clone Wars stuff. There's a lot of Clone Wars stories where they do the thing they were meant to do and they don't feel satisfied by doing it because of the sheer amount of losses and all the other stuff that goes along with it. So it's very much a grey area and a lot of complications there. But I thought it was quite cool. And then also just at the end, when these Jedi appeared, the Jedi that showed up were Qui-Gon Jinn, who everyone should really know, Plo Koon, Kit Fisto, and Depa Billaba. Now, Kit Fisto, he's an Ortolan. He is a green guy with tentacles. He's probably most famous for force pushing the droid of C-3PO's head in the Geonosis arena thing in episode 2. He force pushes it and then smiles. And he's also with Mace Windu along with 2 other Jedi Masters when they go and confront Palpatine in episode 3, and he gets killed. But he's in the Clone Wars a fair amount. He has quite a thick Jamaican accent, I think, in the Clone Wars, and it's Megan's favourite Clone Wars character is Kit Fisto, so that's quite cool. Then you get Plo Koon, who is a Kel Dor, that's their species. He's the Jedi Master who found Ahsoka. He gets killed in the montage in episode 3. He's in a spaceship and he gets shot at by his clones from behind when Order 66 happens. He is like a orange sort of skinned person, and he's got buds over his eyes and like a black face mask thing over his mouth, and that's what he looks like. And then Depa Billaba is a human, and she served as Kanan Jarrus's master, or Caleb June, as he was known then, who is basically one of the main protagonists of the Rebels animated show. You can see him as a Padawan in Clone Wars Season 7 in one of the episodes, and also there is a omnibus of Kanan stories. There's 12 Kanan comics, I think. There's 2 like main Kanan stories essentially that go in these comics. I'll be tackling them at some point in the future, but yeah, basically just his master. I thought that was quite a cool thing to have in there. And then the final comic that I am tackling is, the specific title is 501+1, but it's meaning to be the 501st, because it's the 501st Legion +1. It's featuring Rex, and it is also featuring Jar Jar Binks. As I said, it was released in January 2019, much like the Mace Windu one, because they're in the same comic issue. But this one was written by Marc Guggenheim. The artist is Caspar Wijngaard. I may be pronouncing that wrong. Wijngaard. And the colorist is Cris Peter. So Rex is a clone trooper. He is CT-7567. Him and Ahsoka are basically the main characters in the Clone Wars animated series. Rex is one of my favourite characters in all of Star Wars. He's incredible. He's a clone, and he's just brilliant. Especially him in Season 7 of the Clone Wars. He really steps it up a notch. But he's that. Him and Ahsoka also, they appear in Rebels a bit as well, which is quite cool. And so fingers crossed he's going to appear in future stuff. I've got a couple of little tidbits of information about Jar Jar Binks and also about Rex and what happens to them in Episode 6 and just after that. So stick around for that. So this comic, once again, these comics are quite short because they're just mini stories. So Rex awakens to Anakin, and Anakin basically talks to him a little bit, and then he has a flashback to the Battle of Mimban. Mimban is mentioned in the Clone Wars episode Rookies, which is the 5th episode of Season 1, and is probably one of the best episodes of Season 1. And then also in Solo, A Star Wars Story, where Solo meets Chewie, in the sort of where it's all muddy and stuff, that's Mimban as well. That's where there's a war going on in the Galactic Empire, but where Solo meets Chewie and then also meets Tobias Beckett and the crew, that is Mimban. Anyway, in this Battle of Mimban, you've got Rex and loads of other clone troopers fighting. They've got a Jedi Master called Lan Tik with them. He's a Ricto, which is a certain species, and he gets killed pretty quickly. He hasn't seen in anything else, so he was basically just created for this comic to die, so that's fun. And Jar Jar is basically around them as well, because when they landed there, they needed someone to be able to speak Mimbanese, and Jar Jar can work as a translator. So Jar Jar's running around the battlefield, as you can expect. Just imagine Episode 1, that's generally the kind of style of what he's doing. And they're trying to fight this battle, and obviously their general's just been killed, the Jedi's gone, and they're kind of a little bit stuck and they're being overrun by droids and things. So Rex tells his fellow clones to evacuate. Jesse and Hardcase are in this one. Fans of the Clone Wars know who Jesse and Hardcase are. And he basically tells them to evacuate and just go, while Rex heads to the Separatist shield generator on the down low without telling anyone. En route, he finds a trooper with Jar Jar Binks and tells them both to leave, especially getting Jar Jar to safety, as Rex goes to basically fight by himself. Hours later, Rex is by himself. He's overrun by droids. He's shooting a lot of them, and then he gets a nick in, I think, in his shoulder, and he collapses to the floor. And as a droid stands over him and is about to execute him, a lightsaber cuts through the droids and things. And Rex looks up, and who's standing there? It is Jar Jar with a lightsaber from, Lan Tik, who died. And after Jar Jar has a semi-badass moment of killing those droids and things, he immediately says something stupid, drops the lightsaber, and then Rex takes it off him. And then Jar Jar's like, why are you out here? What are you doing? And he says, look, I'm trying to get to that shield generator over there. If I can destroy that, then we can do a lot of good. And Jar Jar says, okay, well, you did that all alone. I mean, you're very brave, but not so smart. And then the comic ends with those two basically running at the droids at the shield generator, shooting a lot of them. And Jar Jar says, can I have the lightsaber back? Or rather, to quote him, can Misa have Saber Lighty back? Rex says no. And Jar Jar says, Misa didn't think so. And as I said, the comic ends with them shooting at the droids, running at the generator, and that's the end of that. So yeah, that's basically all of the Age of Republic comics. Now, a little bit of information about Rex and about Jar Jar. So Jar Jar isn't seen, obviously, in the original trilogy, because thank God he wasn't created then. But in the Aftermath trilogy by Chuck Wendig, which is actually where Cobb Vanth first appeared, Cobb Vanth being the gentleman in the start of Series 2 of The Mandalorian, played by Timothy Oliphant on Tatooine, who's got Boba Fett's armour. Explaining how he got his armour is in a bit more detail in the Aftermath trilogy. But also, within the Aftermath trilogy, there are several interlude chapters. One of them is, well, 3 of them are about Cobb Vanth. One of them is about Jar Jar. There's a few others about sort of random side characters and things in Aftermath. And basically, Jar Jar is living on Naboo, and he's a street performer. And essentially, the kids love him and think he's funny, and all the adults hate him, which is definitely meant to mirror how people perceived him in Phantom Menace. So he lives his life. He's basically shunned by all the adults because, you know, he was the representative when Padmé was unavailable in Attack of the Clones, and he is one of the ones who basically proposed giving Palpatine emergency power to be able to grant them use of the clone army, and then from there, eventually Palpatine obviously became Emperor, and a lot of people blame Jar Jar for that, which is quite sad, because I personally wouldn't necessarily blame Jar Jar for that, but still. So he's basically a street performer. At the end, by a year or so after Return of the Jedi, which is, you know, like 25 years or 23 years after the events of Revenge of the Sith, he's a street performer. Also, fun facts about Gungans. There are 2 types of Gungans. There is Otola and Ankura. Otola is what Jar Jar looks like and Captain Tarpal looks like. That's the 2 main ones in Phantom Menace. Whereas Boss Nass, who's the guy, is the bigger sort of green one, he is Ankura. Basically, Ankuras just have a shorter bill and are generally stockier and things. So, 2 species of Gungans. How fun. And then with Rex. Rex was born 32 years before the Battle of Yavin, so that's about 10 years before the Clone War started. However, all clones in the clone army have specifically been given growth acceleration, so they age at double the speed. Boba Fett was an unaltered clone, so he just grows like a normal person, but all of the clones, they take half as long. So when a clone's been alive for 10 years, they're actually 20 years old and they look like they're 20. So Rex had that, he had the growth acceleration and things. He is in episode 6. They've kind of retconned him in. In episode 6, when Han Solo and a team of people are going to the Underbunker base and are trying to blow it up, so to destroy the shield generator that's around the Death Star 2, that's on Endor and stuff, there is a gentleman there with quite a large beard. Now in Legends, he was called Nick Sant, which meant to be a joke about Santa Claus, you know, Nicholas, St. Nick, and then what they've basically done is retconned it so that he is actually Rex, because Rex is in the Rebels TV series quite a lot, and he's really good in it. I really like Rex from that show, but he's obviously gotten a lot older. But as I said, because he was in Revenge of the Sith, up to Rebels is about 16 or so years after Revenge of the Sith. So when you see him at the end of Clone Wars Series 7 and then you see him in Rebels, I can't remember what season it is, I think it's season 2 or 3, when you see him, it's been about 16 years, but obviously in clone years, that is actually 32 years. So by that point, he is like 50, 60 sort of years old. So anyway, yeah, Rex is in episode 6, which is quite cool. And then just for clarity as well, he was second in command to Anakin Skywalker. He was a friend of Ahsoka's, as well as Commander Cody and Obi-Wan Kenobi. And to repeat his tag again is CT7567. And that's about it, guys. But before I go, I just want to add about Clone Wars. So all the characters in this sort of episode have been quite Clone Wars-centric and things. I mentioned things about the Clone Wars quite a lot. Now, a lot of you who've listened to our Mandalorian specials and things, or just watched The Mandalorian, don't watch the animated shows because the animation puts you off, or you tried the movie and it sucks. The movie does suck, I agree. Here's a little guide of things. If you like The Mandalorian, you should watch Star Wars Rebels in its entirety, because it's excellent, in my opinion, for the whole way through. There's 4 seasons. A couple of seasons have got 22 episodes, a couple have got 16, but each episode's like 20 minutes long, so they're quite easy to go through. Now, Rebels is all brilliant. I really, really recommend that. However, the prequel series to Rebels, kind of, is Clone Wars. So you've got Clone Wars, which is set between episodes 2 and 3. It features Ahsoka Tano, and it also features Rex, and then Anakin and Obi-Wan are quite central as well to those things. And then, you know, you've got episode 3, there's a big gap, and then you've got Star Wars Rebels, which is set a few years before A New Hope and Rogue One. And there are characters that appear in Clone Wars that also appear in Rebels. Now, Clone Wars, as I said, I love Clone Wars. It's a great series, but the movie itself is terrible. Do not watch the movie, okay? It's just boring. It's not very interesting, and all it does is introduce Ahsoka. All you need to know is basically Obi-Wan was going to get a Padawan, and then the Council decided to give it to Anakin instead. They don't really get along that well, but they kind of do by the end of the film, and then the Clone Wars series kind of goes from there. So my recommendations for the Clone Wars series. Season 1 of Clone Wars is the weakest season, just to be clear, okay? Season 1 of Clone Wars, when I showed Megan all of Clone Wars, I skipped the majority of Season 1 for her because it's just not that good. Season 2 onwards is really good. Season 4 onwards is absolutely incredible. But Season 1 is a bit meh. So I say skip the movie, and then you only need to watch a few episodes of Season 1. You can try and be a completionist, you can try and watch them all if you want, and that's fine, it's up to you. But if you start watching Series 1 and then you get put off by how crap it is, maybe listen to me and check out some of the specific episodes I'm about to name. So you should watch episodes 5, which is called Rookies, then episodes 9 and 10. 9 is called Cloak of Darkness, and 10 is called Lair of Grievous. They're probably the best episodes in the whole of Season 1. They give a lot more backstory to General Grievous, which is really cool. It introduces Kit Fisto, which is the person I mentioned slightly earlier, the guy with the tentacles who's a Nautolan. He's really cool as well, I really like him. And Lair of Grievous episode it's surprisingly brutal, and you get a bit of backstory on Grievous, which is cool. Then episode 11 is called Dooku Captured. That's a good one because you get introduced to Hondo Ohnaka, who is, in my opinion, probably one of the best characters in all of Star Wars. He's in Clone Wars and Rebels. I'm hoping he's going to show up in some other stuff too, maybe even Mandalorian, that would be awesome, or Book of Boba Fett. But he's a really great character, and you can watch Dooku Captured to kind of introduce him. The episode after that, I think, features Jar Jar in it, so you can probably skip to episode 12. If you're not that fussed about meeting Hondo, then he does appear later on in the series, and you don't need to have seen his introduction because it kind of self-sufficient. And then episodes 19 to 21 are the Ryloth Arc. Now, that arc is specifically to do with Hera Syndulla's dad. He features in Rebels because Hera Syndulla is the main Twi'lek in Star Wars Rebels. She's one of the best pilots in the galaxy. I believe she's in Star Wars Squadrons as well, the game. So if you want to see what her dad got up to on Ryloth and some vague things that get mentioned in Rebels, that's that arc. And then the last episode of Season 1 is called Hostage Crisis, and I recommend that because that leads on to Series 2. So in brief, watch the episodes of Clone Wars 5, 9, 10, maybe 11, 19, 20, 21 and 22. If you really want to cut it fine and you want to watch as little of Series 1 as possible, I would just say watch episode 5, Rookies, episode 10, Lair of Grievous, and episode 22, Hostage Crisis, because the other ones you can kind of skip. But I'd say do that, and then from Season 2, really, you can watch pretty much all of them. There are a couple of naff episodes in Season 2, but then after that, Season 3 onwards is just brilliant throughout, I'd say. So that's my recommendations for all of that sort of stuff. Anyway, guys, really hope you guys enjoyed this. I hope that me coming back in 2021 has been a lot of fun. Haven't fully decided what I'm going to be doing next week. I may end up doing a book review of Lost Stars. I may end up doing the next issue or next arc of the Dr. Aphra comics. I may end up doing the next issue / arc of the main run of Star Wars comics. I haven't fully figured it out yet, but it's probably going to be one of those three. I've also started reading the new High Republic book as well, which is quite exciting, and the High Republic comics are going to start coming in soon too, and I've got quite a few variants of them, which I'm quite excited about. But yeah, aside from that, that's what you can kind of get from the next couple of weeks or so. I haven't planned super far ahead as of yet, so I kind of wanted to break over the Christmas period, so I'm kind of piecing it together as I go. Let me know if there's anything else you guys need, like message me, contact me on social media at Genuine Chit-Chat or anything like that, if you want to ask me any questions or anything like that. Also, if you follow me on social media, you will see that I take photos of a lot of the comics and things I speak with. So if you want to follow me on Instagram specifically, or Facebook or Twitter, you will see photos I take of the comics I'm reading. I normally include the covers, the crawls, and then a few panels I think are quite cool and artwork. If you want to hear about that Jar Jar Binks for holding a lightsaber, I've taken a photo of that, so if you go onto my Instagram probably on Sunday after this drops, you should be able to see that sort of stuff. But that's enough from me, guys. Thank you as always for listening. Check out my other show, Genuine Chit-Chat, on its own feed and things, where I speak to a different guest in each episode. I've had many members of the Comics in Motion family on, and I'm due to have many more on in the future. And also check out all the other great shows on the Comics in Motion feed, because they're all brilliant and I don't have enough time in the day to listen to them all, but I try my best. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for listening as always. I hope you have had a good start to 2021. I know there's a lot of craziness going on in the world right now, but I hope that you guys are doing okay. Message me if you need anything, and as always, guys, may the Force be with you.